Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to go over a new prospectus filed by RexShares for their potential future offering of Income Max ETFs and give you some of my thoughts. As always, don't forget to smash that like button if you like this type of content so the algorithm gods know that I'm here, and hit subscribe if you're new so you're alerted every time I publish a new video about stocks, investing, finance, and news. But before I get started, you know I have to hit you with this quick disclaimer to appease those YouTube gods. This video is for entertainment purposes only. It is not financial advice. You should always consult a professional. With that out of the way, guys, let's hop into the video. All right, so we're going to hop over to the sec.gov website. We're going to check the Edgar database. And you guys can see here that this was filed August 8th, 2025. It was not that long ago. All right, this is for a new lineup of ETFs coming out of Rex. All right. And I'm going to answer the big burning question right now. No, I do not know when they will actually release these ETFs. All right, this is basically a draft document for what they intend to file for. All right, so in the future, this is what they potentially will come out with. Who knows when they will actually drop these ETFs, okay? But it is interesting to see how the fund managers are kind of thinking and approaching the market, right? It seems that the market, you and I, investors, we want leverage, right? We want leverage ETFs with income. So it's really interesting to see what Rex is coming out with. All right, so let's take a deeper look in the prospectus and see what's in it. All right, so we can see that they're going to have the usual suspect lineup. They're going to have one for Tesla, one for Nvidia, one for MicroStrategy, one for Robinhood, Coinbase, Palantir, Google, Apple. Circle is actually an interesting one. Circle, if you don't know, IPO'd earlier this year. Their stock rocketed to the moon. They're the sole distributor of USDC, which is a stable coin, a crypto stable coin. They actually partnered with Coinbase. So this is actually a really interesting one. I'm actually excited to see that one. And they're also going to have one for Bitcoin. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what is going to be in this. All right. So let's look at the fund or the investment objectives. Hopefully you guys can see this. But anyways, the fund's primary investment objective is to seek to provide current income. All right. That's why the name is called Income Max. All right. The fund's secondary investment objective is to seek to provide exposure to the performance of a leverage exchange traded fund designed to deliver 2 times or 200% the daily performance before fees, expenses of the common stock of whatever that is, Tesla, MicroStrategy, Google, etc. So this is kind of interesting, right? This actually kind of reminds me of another fund that's out there, which I'll go over in just a moment, but we'll see how this actually performs if it can meet that, kind of quote unquote uncapped upside, because I think that would be a game changer for these ETFs if they can actually rise in value and, actually return that 2 times or that 200% performance. So let's look a little deeper. So we don't know what the portfolio turnover is going to be because the fund is newly organized. So portfolio turnover information isn't available. This is very important to know. But for single stock cover call ETFs or single stock exposed ETFs, usually there's no turnover because they're just investing in the single underlier. So we should be okay there. Now, if it's a fund of funds or if it's a, something like maybe a ulti where they constantly swap out their underliers, there will be portfolio turnover. All right, so let's take a look at the actual investment strategies. I know this looks like some Christmas lights here, but don't worry. I'm just going to go over everything at a high level for you guys. All right, this fund is an actively managed ETF that aims to pay out weekly distributions. And to do this, it invests in financial instruments tied to leveraged ETFs. All right, mainly option and swap agreements is what they're going to be using, and may also buy shares of that leverage ETF directly. RexShares does have their own lineup of leverage shares, so I wouldn't be surprised if they use that in the future. All right, the leverage ETF itself, just for those who don't know, is designed to deliver 2 times the daily performance of an underlying security, before fees or expenses. So an example of something like this is if Nvidia went up 10%, then theoretically the leveraged version of this would go up 20%. All right, but same if it goes down 10%, right? The leverage ETF would go down 20%. So this is why you have to be careful when you include these in your portfolio. So basically under normal conditions, at least 80% of the fund's assets are going to be invested in strategies that either provide exposure to the underlying security, i.e. Nvidia, Tesla, Coinbase, etc. That will provide that exposure, all right, or generate income based on it. The fund also holds U.S. securities or treasuries, as it's known, to help produce additional income. It also acts as collateral. All right. The fund primarily uses these option contracts, all right, which is very important. These are the strategies that they're going to use in this ETF. Cover calls, all right. They're going to sell calls on a leveraged ETF it owns to collect premium income, though this caps upside if the ETF rises too fast, all right. Again, all cover call ETFs, they have this thing where, they have capped upside, and that's just because of the mechanics of cover call or options investing. Now, RexShares does have its own unique lineup of growth and income ETFs where they have 1/2 capped upside, right? Using a cover call strategy, but also another half of the ETF is invested in leveraged, 105 to 150%. So that is how they kind of beat that capped upside. All right, but anyways, let's go back to this. They're going to be using call spreads, selling a call while buying a higher strike price, which provides some upside participation while capping gains and still generating premium income, right? This is how they're going to distribute that high distribution rate. They're also going to be using put rights, selling puts to generate income. Again, just another way, but with the risk of losses if the ETF falls below the strike price. And then they're also going to be using put spreads, selling a put while buying a lower strike price or a lower strike put, to limit downside risk while keeping premium income. The fund is also going to use swaps or swap agreements to replicate exposure to the leverage ETF. All right, these agreements, the swaps, the total return of the leverage ETF for a set rate of return, giving the fund synthetic exposure. If the swap availability is limited, the fund may lean more heavily on options. All right, so just something to be aware of. All right, so the goal for this ETF is not just income. It's also supposed to deliver leveraged ETFs performance, which should make this a very attractive ETF. But because leverage ETFs, they rebalance daily, that's why they're not popular for buy and hold investors. And a lot of people will say you intraday trade these, you trade them, you swing trade them for, a couple of days. These are not typically your buy and hold instruments. Their long-term returns are not that simple, 2x multiple of the underlying security. Just because Nvidia goes up, 20 or 30%, it doesn't always mean you're going to get 40 to 60% on this ETF, right? Because there's volatility drag. So, the benefit or the thing with this ETF is that they're going to be in and out of these seemingly almost every other day. So we'll see how this plays out. Again, the risk of investing in these leverage ETFs is, over longer periods of over longer periods of time, you're going to have that compounding and volatility decay. All right, which means that basically your returns can differ significantly from the underlier. All right, so this is why people have to be very careful on how they implement leverage ETFs into their portfolio. It takes really a lot of active management. Typically, again, these are not buy and hold instruments, but we'll see what comes of these ETFs when they're launched. This will be a really, really interesting lineup that RexShares is going to come out with. Now, for anyone who's not initiated in this space, this sounds like something very familiar. All right, here is YieldBoost. YieldBoost from GraniteShares. They do a very similar strategy. As a matter of fact, I almost want to say they do the same exact strategy, right? Here's one for Nvidia, NVYY, and it has a really crazy distribution rate of 100%, okay? And it pays weekly. That is pretty crazy. The expense ratio, I think, is like actually, the expense ratio for this is 99 basis points. So I wouldn't be surprised if the RexShares ones are going to be about the same, maybe 99 basis points. That's what it is for all of these ones. So we'll see. But the burning question on everyone's mind is going to be, how will these actually perform, right? How will these actually perform once they're available on the market? So I don't have a crystal ball, and we could only use what other funds are available that mimic, what is potentially going to come out from RexShares to get an idea. So I have an example that we can use although take it with a grain of salt, it may not be, exactly how this all plays out. So again, GraniteShares, it has a pretty big fan base. People love these YieldBoost products, and they deliver exactly what they're saying. Yield boost. They're giving you maximum yield off of these 2x long, which means 200% exposed Nvidia daily ETFs. All right. So again, my opinion is that these Income Max ETFs are going to be basically a mimic of these ones or clones of these ones. All right. So let's see how this actually performs against the underlier. So here in Seeking Alpha, I have Nvidia common stock with NVYY, the ETF from GraniteShares. This is the 200% leverage ETF with income. So we can see, and we're doing from inception date of NVYY. All right, so the inception date there, and we can see, and this is just a price return. This is not a total return. So total return is with dividends reinvested. All right, or counting the dividend as well. We can see NVYY returned 5.7%, where Nvidia returned 38.88%. So that is a more than 33% outperformance by the underlier, or underperformance by NVYY. But that doesn't tell us the whole story. We need to see what else, with the dividend included, what does that look like? So we're going to go to total return, and we're going to see what that looks like. So we have to adjust a date here. We're going to start May 13th, I believe, is when the inception date for NVYY came out. And we can see it tells a different story. NVYY returned 31.93%, which is still technically an underperformance of the underlier NVDA, which came in at 38.89%. So who knows what these ETFs will do, as far as, their price performance and the total return. Who knows? Hopefully they, probably perform a little better than the underlier at the very minimum, but we'll see. I'm still pretty excited. Again, this is all the fund managers coming out with new innovative products that we as investors will benefit from. All right. They know, you can see it. You have Roundhill, you have RexShares, you have GraniteShares, you even have YieldMax that's coming out, potentially in the future, rumored to come out with their Lev Maxes. And this is all good for the market, right? This is good for us. This is what investors want. They want, leveraged income producing ETFs, right? Defiance, they have their own for MicroStrategy, ticker MST, a huge fan base around there. So anyways, guys, that'll do it for this video. I hope you found it informational, educational, and at least a little bit entertaining. All right, with that being said, guys, I will see you in the next video. You guys have a great day.